Hello and welcome. My name is Bridie Moran and I am the Executive Director at 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art, which is based in Sydney. Thank you all for joining us today for this very exciting talk, the first in a series. Before we get stuck into what awaits us in Befouled Desire, I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm broadcasting from, the land of the Eora people, the Gadigal people, of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, Australia. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to pay my respects and acknowledge all of the Indigenous people and elders of the many lands on which we're reaching today. We're across, I believe, about 4 or 5 different countries from the attendee and panelist lists in front of us, and we're delighted to be connecting with everyone today. For those of you who aren't familiar with 4A, 4A is a little not-for-profit gallery based in Sydney in Australia. We were founded in 1996, and while we have a small space, we do a lot of different things all across the Asia region. We are kind of focused on commissioning, presenting, documenting and researching Asian and Asian Australian contemporary art and connecting with people to share art and ideas. Obviously, days like today allow us really exciting new opportunities to do this. And we're really delighted to be able to be connecting with the Australia Council for the Arts, the Factory Contemporary Art Centre, Campbelltown Art Centre on this event, which will be part of, as I mentioned, a series and is also part of a really exciting curatorial associate program. Now, some of you have probably attended many Zooms at this point, others maybe less so. If you are unfamiliar with the Zoom webinar format, I'm just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping for everyone before we get started on our talk. Down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a few different buttons. If you're a panelist, you'll be able to do things like share your screen. So today we'll be viewing a whole lot of amazing videos and images from our various speakers. If you're an attendee, you'll have access to a Q&A button and a chat button. The Q&A button is the digital equivalent of raising your hand during a panel talk. So do use that. You can use it throughout the talk. It won't interrupt anyone, but it instead will show us you have a question. And Zoe, who will be moderating today, will be able to attend to your questions, likely at the end of the talk, but where it's appropriate during discussion. Your questions will also be shown as answered once people have responded to them in the talk. If you have an issue, like you can't hear a speaker properly, you are having feedback issues, a speaker's dropped out, or you're not able to see someone's screen, we'd really, really love to know about it. And the best way to tell us about it is using the chat function. You can either chat just to me directly. I'll be in the background sorting out different technical issues. I'm a good port of call, but if you want to let everyone know, you can click to chat to all panelists and attendees, and we'll get onto it as soon as possible. You might also want to say hello to someone that you see in the list or in our discussion today, and the chat function is a great way to do that as well. The other thing to note is that as an attendee, your mic will be automatically muted. For our panelists, you're currently on mute, but we'll be unmuting you shortly to have a chat. If you do actually want to speak with everyone, you can raise your hand when the time's appropriate, and either Zoe or myself can unmute you and you can join in our discussion over video and audio. Now that's my little introduction and housekeeping all done. As I say, any questions during our session today, please use the chat function and let me know. But I'm now really delighted to be handing over to Zoe from the Factory Art Centre, our partner in this upcoming series of talks. Befouled Desire is our first discussion in this series, and we've been very, very lucky to be able to bring these speakers together. So I'm delighted to hand over now to Zoe. I'm going to make you the host, Zoe, and we'll get started on today's talk. Thank you again, and bye.
Good morning, good afternoon, potentially even very good evening. I think I see someone joining from the UK. It's really lovely to be here. I wish we were all in person, but thank God for technology to be able to bring us together to continue to think critically at a time where it is more present than ever that I believe we do so. And it's a real delight to have the collaborators, as Bridie just mentioned, to be with 4A Centre for Contemporary Art, and then the Australia Council for the Arts and Campbelltown. It's really lovely to be back in the workings of something in Australia, actually, to be honest. But to begin, I am the artistic director of the Factory Contemporary Arts Centre. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are one of Vietnam's first purpose-built spaces for contemporary art, committed to the exploration and raising of awareness of the role of contemporary art and artists in an interdisciplinary world. And today, it is a pleasure to have three amazing artists with us, Martha Atienza, Jiandyin, and Lê Giang. And today's event was predominantly put together in response to a particular program that my colleagues at the factory and I have been working on for the last 18 months, nearly 2 years, called Realigning the Cosmos. And this is a project. I just want to show a brief screen. So, Bridie, can you make me a host so I can share?
Zoe, you should be host now if you want to try and share.
Oh, it's not letting me. Oh dear, we have our first tech issue. Okay, it's okay, I can talk through it. So basically, Realigning the Cosmos was and is a program that thinks about what is the repercussions of our spiritual beliefs on material consumption. So by this, I mean, we have in Vietnam, water, wind, earth, fire, metal. These are metals, these are elements whose belief cause certain consumptions. So this means that in Vietnam, for example, there is a belief that if you take rhino horn and you grind it, that this is something that will increase a man's virility, and thus we have the extinction of the white rhino. Then also far up north, we have a pagoda called Tham Juk Pagoda. And this is a site that has caused mass deforestation. And according to spiritual tourism, this is a site meant for honoring the spirits, the gods. And yet 75% of this site is for casino and restaurants and theme park activities. So the project itself aims to ask, how can artists raise awareness of what the impact of our spiritual beliefs are today? And it's also to think not only of how our belief in them is causing issue, but perhaps how our neglect. So for example, you think the Australian bushfires of 2019 and 2020, how much damage could have been prevented had we paid more attention to Indigenous forms of knowledge whose understanding of backfire burning and the need to do it on a persistent, consistent basis could have prevented an immense amount of damage. So the project itself thinks about how artists are incredible agents to which broader society can start to visually, emotively, intellectually feel that it's everybody's responsibilities to think about how we can improve and prevent damage like this. So for today's event, Befouling Desire, we have Martha Atienza, Jiandyin, and Lê Giang, speaking respectively from the Bantayan Islands, from Ratchaburi. So this is Bantayan Islands in the Philippines, Ratchaburi in Thailand, Hanoi in Vietnam. And I must forgive any of you joining one very nerve-wracking thing about today is that everyone has incredibly unstable internet connections, and we are doing our best to ensure that that doesn't rock the boat the wrong way. So just bear with us if sound might drop in, drop out just a little bit. But these wonderful artists with us today investigate contemporary art as a tool through which human habit and desire can be scrutinized. And brilliantly, they show how working via community action, collaborative research, and particular visual strategies of display bring to light very incredibly important things to think about our social world. They are committed to their local context, which I am completely in awe of. They're deeply aware of the political limits of the disenfranchised, and these artists reveal the social repercussion of resource extraction, prompting critical questions concerning the right to sovereignty, the exploitative limits of the human body, and the role of luxury in cultural superstition. Critically, I thought about, in putting together this panel, the role of how our need has become a near righteous claim, dangerously confused with ideas of desire. Such attitude today drives our globalizing capitalism, which is disguised as corporate growth for the battle and betterment of national economies. We continue to consume without heed of the scale of damage in our desire for material wealth, without heed of the interdependent environment that we are robbing. In this conversation today, the impact of our classification, division, and control of territory, our expending of plastic packaging, our treasuring of gemstone, amongst others, is under investigation. Linking desire with repercussion, our beliefs, our assumptions, our frameworks of survival, so as to think about how to curb the destruction of desire. And as I said, to really think harder, what role do artists play in revealing these kinds of struggles? And what research methods and aesthetic techniques of display are they utilizing? And how does it increase the consideration of cause? So to begin, I'd like to introduce Martha Atienza, who incredibly has put together a pre-recording just so that we don't have a complete break. So as brief introduction to Martha, her artistic practice is sociological in nature. Her varied sculptural and video installations, often utilizing technology in the form of varied mechanical systems. And her work tends to be collaborative in nature, working with people from varying backgrounds, particularly with the residents of Bantayan Island, where her family is from. And much of her practice engages narratives woven around issues of environmental change, displacement, cultural loss, governance, and socio-economic disparities. I asked Martha to think about two particular works that she, first one, and I'm going to probably say the title of this a little wrong, sorry Martha, but I'll try. Gilabong ang akong posed sa dagat. My navel is buried in the sea, which began in 2010. And then another piece called Equation of State, done in 2019. And to these works, I asked Martha, much of your practice responds to the lives and conditions of where you were born, and you continue to live, which is Bantayan Island. Known as having one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, particularly known for its coral and mangrove species, sadly, its wilderness status was recently revoked, thus paving the way for extraction of human and non-human for mass urban development and tourism. What desires fueled this decision, and how has it impacted local attitude to land ownership? How has her work made evident the social and biological repercussions of such a status being revoked? So I'll now let Bridie just share the pre-recording. Thanks, Bridie.
Apologies, everyone. Just one moment as we get this into full screen. Apologies, everyone. I'm just going to start the video again and just try and get our sound working. Just one moment. Thank you for your patience.
My name is Martha Atienza. I would like to share with you a little bit of what is happening here on Bantayan Island. We're looking at my friends. My name is Martha Atienza. I would like to share with you a little bit of what is happening here on Bantayan Island. We're looking at my friends living on the coast of Marideos. It's in the northern tip of the island, in the Visayan Sea. It's across the largest marine protected area called the Tanyan Strait, and it's the central part of the Philippines. Can you imagine that Bantayan Island was once called the Little Alaska of the Philippines, all because of the abundance of fish? There was so much marine diversity. Almost everyone on the island is living off the sea. Their old ways of fishing are changing rapidly. Most of them are compressor divers that have moved here from smaller islands close by and some far. You can see the mountains of seashells they catch and sell. A few years ago it was scallops and now it's litog. One of the biggest buyers and boat owners are our politicians, including our mayor. These are exported to cities and outside of the Philippines. As commercial fishing is taking over the seas, also illegally and made possible through corruption, small-scale fishing cannot compete with large commercial fishing boats. The fishing system changed from collective gathering and sharing to a profit-driven system in a very short amount of time. This is why they resort to illegal ways of fishing, such as dynamite and cyanide fishing. Using compressor diving equipment and diving up to 40 meters deep is a desperate way of fishing. It's really survival. Many people die of the bends yearly. I just attended a funeral of a compressor diver on one of the islands just a few days ago. Bantayan and its group of islands has been a protected wilderness area since 1981. And a bill to lift this has already been passed to the Senate and will most probably push through. The problem with the lift is that it would leave only 4.7% protected, and that's 540 hectares out of 11,462 hectares. The focus will be mainly on what's left of mangrove forests, and that's not so much. And they're not looking at the watershed area where our freshwater supply can be replenished. They're not looking at rehabilitation of mangrove, forest, swamp, and wetland areas. So the 4.7% is the only intact wilderness left on the island. So, how can we trust the government to manage this when they have not even protected the existing protected areas? Many people are for the lifting, as this promises land titles to attract investors. This would open the doors to development. I'm worried that the development will be the same as they have done in islands such as Boracay. Boracay is the Philippines' famous tourist island, and where it's lumad, indigenous people do not own the land, and they have been mostly driven away, making way for large hotels and resorts on the coast, such as Shangri-La and more. Last November 2020, the governor opened a commercial airport on Bantayan Island. Bantayan Island will be one of the main tourist destinations in Central Visayas. Land prices have skyrocketed already in a short amount of time as predictions look profitable. Investors have been buying up coastal areas, and so coastal areas where fisher folks live are even more attractive now. I see a clear link between the forceful movement of fisher folks inland and the turning of coastal areas into commercial tourist spots. Fisher folks have already been moved inland since the super typhoon Haiyan in 2013. There's a 20-meter easement zone where no structures can be built, and the shoreline is considered public domain. They've already moved 9,000 families of fisher folks to national housing projects inland. That's up to, 5 kilometers inland away from the shore. An average household holds 4 to 5 family members. So this is a movement of about 43,000 people. This does not include non-government housing projects like, Habitat for Humanity, Gawad Kalinga, Caritas Philippines, Islamic Relief, and more. It's a complicated issue as the 20-meter easement zone is implemented to protect against storm surges. It's meant to move people to safe areas, but a lot of fisher folks have moved back because they need to stay with their fishing boats for livelihood. As you can see in the image, the sewage canals have been built right under their houses. There's also the rising seas worldwide that we here on the island are feeling firsthand as well. But the issue of climate change are covered by the daily survival of people. Especially now with the pandemic, people's focus is on food security. There are several seawall projects on the island, but people's main concern is access to the sea to continue fishing for their livelihood. They are ready to move wherever they can on the coast as long as they have access to the sea. Most fisher folks on Bantayan have always been nomadic, following their catch. So there's a drastic change in place and culture. There are many issues to discuss, and it's been a challenge to find ways to tackle the many challenges. I've been working with my friends, neighbors, and family since 2010. The first project we did together was called Gilubong ang akong pusod sa dagat. My navel is buried in the sea. It was initially a way for me to understand my own family and the work they did at sea. My father was a sea captain, a son of a lighthouse watcher of 20 years on a tiny island north of Madedehos. My brothers and cousins mostly work in the shipping industry. My friends and neighbors are fishermen or international seafarers. The project was a way for all of us to learn together. I started getting on international ships in 2010. And the first person I filmed was my younger brother working on a riverboat in the Netherlands. Soon joined other ships like a container ship traveling from Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia, joining Dodong Disabilie, who I grew up with. He was then a chief mate, and now he's a captain. And I did several of these trips. The last one was the transatlantic crossing from Mississippi to Russia and then Sweden. And I filmed mostly men I grew up with. And as I returned to Bantayan Island, I realized that, I should be filming the men working on boats on Bantayan, the fisher folks. So, this made sense because this is where we all come from. So I filmed several types of fishing, but I did become quite obsessed with compressor diving. These men travel far and dive up to 8 hours, sometimes with one break in between. I started visiting my friends at home, sharing the footage that we filmed together at sea of them working. And they started telling all their stories while their family listened. And there was such a need to share because their families have no idea what they really do at sea. So, the family of the fisher folks, the wives didn't know what the breathing hoses were for. The international seafarers' wives did not know how big the container ships were. They didn't understand that the guys rarely came off the ships and that everything is automated, These sharing sessions, they got bigger and they got more organized and they became more formal sometimes. And it took about 2 years. We separated the talks with the fisher folks and the families from the international seafarers and their families. I mean, even though I saw their direct connection and the need for them to be talking as a community, it really was a 2-year process. Each group had their own issues, the leaving of their families, income, gambling, the destruction of the sea, the danger of their work. This is just naming a few things. And what happened on Bantayan Island is that, young fishermen became international seafarers, especially in the 80s. And my father was one of the first, and he started in the 70s. And there's now as a result of that, there's this drastic dislocation within the communities. And there's this huge gap in income between fishermen and seafarers. And, the footage of them working at sea became a kind of way for all of us to get together and start difficult dialogues and try to get our communities together again. For equation of state, the questions of ownership, who owns the land and sea? How do we deal with climate change issues? How do we together create community? What is community? How do we together find ways to face these challenges? Since all the work I've done in 2010, I'm finally starting to join the discussions among leaders and local government. I've been giving trainings on mangrove rehabilitation and on policy making regarding our sea. Or at least, slowly you start getting invited to the table. My voice and our voices might be heard. This work was a way to research and work on actions, surveying mangrove areas and beach forests, identifying and collecting native tree species on the island. I was able to receive training from the Zoological Society of London on identifying locations and species for mangrove rehabilitation, and working together with community and the local government unit to achieve this. Since we do not have the luxury of time, human interference is necessary at the moment. I work closely with my brother, and together we are working with a group of locals tackling the lifting of the Wilderness Act. We have been collecting signatures and educating people here what this bill means and what is at stake. Before the pandemic happened, we were to travel to lobby for our cause. I had 25 rhizophora stylosa mangroves, that's bakau here, that I had grown from propagules, that's seeds, found ashore, and I have I put them in buckets with rainwater and they grew. These plants are so resilient. The interesting thing about the mangroves is that they protect us from storm surges. They filter the water, protects and feeds species. It's countless. But they also can store huge amounts of carbon, more than a normal forest. This is why companies with their CSR are investing huge amounts in replanting projects. The problem often is that they do huge numbers of one single wrong species in often wrong areas, such as seagrass, which is a vital part of the ecosystem, all to show that they are doing their part. We have to reverse the damage that we have done to the environment, but we need everyone involved and do their part. We also need to listen to local knowledge, but I also believe we need to combine this with new systems. This work, for me, it was also a way for so many different people with different backgrounds here on the island to work together. Fishermen, karaoke builders, a programmer, the Department of Natural Resources, the local government unit, young people. I mean, lots of dreamers to accomplish making a machine that could pull the mangroves in and out of water, creating ripples and light reflections. This led to this same team now spearheading a project at the dump site. They're finding ways to turn plastic sachets, the plastic waste that is difficult to recycle, but is also mostly used here for daily consumption. People buy shampoo sachets every day, soap, conditioner, and they want to turn this specific plastic into building materials. Since wood, sand, and other materials are scarce, they are really expensive and they need to be imported. So imagine that we can use our creativity and find innovative solutions to the problems, or at least we can move towards achieving results that benefit all of us.
Thank you, Martha. And I'm sure that, I hope that we have a lot of questions out there for you at the end. So just to let everyone know that we're going to have all of the artists present and then we'll gather together at the end. So do, as we're moving through, type into the Q&A if you have any questions for Martha. But we nearly lost Martha there, but she came back. Yeah, I'm really quite in awe of certain stories concerning those fisher folk. And one element that I really took away when I first saw those two works was realizing questions to the fisher folk of why they decided it was not to be for them to go into the corporate fisher seafarer trade. And they made comment that they wanted to be able to return to their families at the end of every day. And I thought that tiny little narrative said a lot about how the industrialization of economies causes a separation between what is our personal domestic worlds and what is our so-called working worlds. And here I find myself thinking about the high number of migrant workers currently being cut off from their families at this particular time of the year, where in Vietnam and China, for example, many of us have been locked out of going home. So I'm aware that there's a lot of those other kinds of dialogues, and hopefully we can talk about that at the end. But then speaking about migrant working and how it can be quite psychologically damaging to be away from your family due to the nature of your work, that element is present in the work by Jiandyin. So Jiandyin's research is interdisciplinary in nature, produced in collaborative spirit and driven by social forms of inquiry. They collect a lot of data and they analyze its social repercussions. And their visual practice, though conceptual in form, carries an abundance of materials and knowledge and stories behind it. And their sculptures, their photographs, their drawings, their films often beg a reassessment of political hegemony, economic corruption, and spiritual advancement. So in preparation for today, I asked if Jiandyin could share a little about a project called The Ontology of Gold, Magic Mountains. It's a project they've been developing since 2007. This long-term artistic research relies on a complex network of people who share and study data with them: scientists, miners, health experts, historians, and more. And as a project, Magic Mountain illustrates the complicity of power and corruption in trade of the rocks from heaven, the jade. And it's particularly particular site research for Jiandyin around the Hapakant mines. I hope I said that right. It is estimated that this is a 30 billion jade trade around this, what's called the Zomia region between Thailand and Myanmar. Zomia refers to a geographical area historically self-governed, where many communities actually have their own armed armies. This area and the mining is most dubious because of the environmental degradation, the exploitation of drug abuse, narcotics used to fuel humans to work, and the ethnic tensions that fuel black market extraction and trade. So I asked Jiandyin to share a little about this project, but also to share what triggered the use of heroin and meth by miners and what drives the thirst for jade today. Who are the key consumers? Thank you. We can't hear you. Just unmute your, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now we're here. Okay, here we go. All right, so yeah, we're gonna start from here. Um, the Panglong Agreement, the extreme ethnic conflict after the Panglong Agreement was abolished. It has been a long-term effect on all ethnic people in Myanmar who still cling to the agreement. Although hopeless, the government has reacted with negligence to them. Public health and medical training for the workers are limited as the military battles persist in the rural area. Local NGO and international observers reports showed a high incidence of drugs using up to 75 to 90%, including HIV infections among the miners, where the NGO had to supply syringes for them to reduce the infections. The government negligence seems to be a hidden agenda to destroy them. And yes, the miners use drugs to cope with long hours of work, but one particular goal that keeps them do the dangerous work is luck. Um, from the leading journal, one of the stone experts in Hong Kong admits that selling of jade is all about luck. In this decade, fine jade's price is far more valuable than gold. Its price depends on subjective evaluations. It is luck that makes the business practices bizarre and mysterious and result high stakes of gambling, smuggling, and rebel politics. The chance of gamble on rough jade when cut and polished could make a person's fortune. So yeah, this is the reason why the heroin and the meth still among the minors. Yeah. Um, so shall I go ahead to?
Yes, please share information on the project. Thank you.
Yeah. So the concerning what drives thirst to jade today, the key consumers. Jade's main markets are China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. But buyers or jade consumers are end of the root of a legitimate business that a huge money laundering operation uses for converting the benefit. Nevertheless, the money laundering is an obscure operation that involved with complex networks, a big database to decompose. So we also would like to date back to Cold War, late 1980s, when the U.S. began to impose sanctions on Burma over minorities, military, government, including drugs market. The Reagan administration suspended all foreign assistance and arms sales, stopped supporting the economy. So the blockade, Myanmar had made jade appear in black market, a chain of black economy with drug manufacturers, um, dealers, smugglers, and armed forces. As jade is the second most prized gem in the world after the diamonds, and its value is unpredictable. It led jade to fall into money laundering current. So next, we're gonna step back to jadeite origin through geology. Consider Somnia, where Patan, the dangerous mine, located. Um, Here, the metamorphic rocks were formed in the Precambrian period, around 4,600 million years ago. It was a high pressure and relatively low temperature conditions where two tectonic plates, the Eurasia, collide. This formation called the Great Orogenesis. So when the rocks cool down, the Earth remained wrinkle form. Uh, this was the origin of the summit of the Everest and the Southeast Asia continent. Unique minerals occurred, such as pyroxene, and jadeite is one of its family. With its silicate base, it comprises with rich and varied hues and semi-translucent appeal. So the wrinkled mountains we analogize with the cosmology of the people of Somnia, an old tale that we used in the Friction Current project said the Magic Mountain said mountains are wrinkled lands sewn by special thread. So here we question what is the special thread? Then jade first entered China through Silk Road and came into prominence around Qing dynasty. The imperial jade specifies the best green color and translucency, but jadeite was uh, recognized its unique textural qualities and distinguished from nephrite just around 1860s, where by a French chemist. That was when it became even more expensive. However, because of the difficult terrain and fierce touching real people, including the military government. Jay's admirer once said, "It is heaven's stone, but you have to go through hell to get a piece of it." So after surfing on big data, we found so much evidence, which include many names as actors who played a role in different ways in the black trafficking, consists of senior government officials, multinational business people, local and international politicians, army leaders, war material, chemists, drug dealers, etc. That the seeming of non-human are being subtext inside the work. Uh, so to project here with these actors that were visually connected as if a hidden code, finally weighed by painting many thin layers on the original silhouettes. In linking to what happened in the trafficking current, we can see how much these actors possess magic power, from one famous deception on sensual debates in the Thai parliament for the Agriculture and Cooperative Assistance Ministry, who have been 4 years in jail in Australia in 1993, seen from the Sydney Morning Herald, for his freeing of distrust debate by declare heroin is tapioca flour. So our other samples of non-human in the project, the drug users appeared in the contaminated urine in the circulate fountains. So in terms of the meth and the extraction of the jade, what is the connection behind it? We have to refer to the post-Punsa period, that the methamphetamine has become one of the drug business accelerators, with its fast speed and in terms of both demand and supply. Its fast manufacturing process has become its crucial bargain power compared to heroin manufacturing, which requires and relies on natural factors. Meth now can be made by anyone who has equipment and a basic understanding of chemistry. So nowadays, most of the meth factories are mobile factories. So on the other hand, concerning the connection of jade and drug, there used to be the political and human rights boycott on the jewelry trade from Myanmar by the US. But that did not decelerate the jade trading business in Myanmar. The situation transfers the business into the black market, connecting with influential groups of drug manufacturers and dealers who share their network that spreads entirely in Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia, and hold their annual auctioning system organized by Myanmar jewelry traders enterprises. Accordingly, the benefit from drugs is used for bidding in the jade auctions, or to extract banknotes out of stones through auctions. So in terms of the benefit behind the jade in our research, a major report by a human rights organization in in 2012, jade mine concession had collected up to 43 trillion kilograms of jade, could be worth about 80,000 trillion, but while the Myanmar government could collect only 34 trillion of the jade mine tax. To extend showing how large the business is, from the most recent news that one of the biggest drug mafia have been arrested. TRspodC, a Chinese-born Canadian national, said to be head of the company which dominates 70 billion illegal drugs market across Asia. Also member of the TRspodC gang who hold 70% of the drug market in Australia. His manufacturing bases are in the Golden Triangle, the border between Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam, and Myanmar. His usual travels are between Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. So how does all these present in the work? Initially, the project started from the intention to challenge legal system, international authority, and meth trafficking by transporting drugs across countries. Drug users' urine is our focus. We collect the contaminated urine through officers. So meth was hidden in the urine. Through this information we got from the forensic department, meth has a half-life at 1,000 nanograms per milliliter, or approximately 50% of the user's urine could still be detectable in 4 to 5 days. This means theoretically the compounds we collect could be extracted back by the laboratory. In order to maintain its pathological and half-life of the meth, the temperature both during the delivery and exhibiting had to be of 8 to 15 degrees Celsius. That was why the urine system was in the glass cabinet. So the urine here thus can reflect more than 37 meth manufacturing sources around the north border of Thailand. They are main source. So finally, meth was legally shipped to Taiwan in the form of urine by certified by shipper or ourselves that the goods are non-infectious human urine. The urine that then circulates in jadeite rolling ball fountain to make sure that it is real jadeite from Pakan mine, Kachin say. We saw it from a Myanmar jewelry businessman in Bangkok who linked us to his network in Nassau, to a black merchant in Mandalay, the biggest jade rest area and market in Myanmar. The jade was cut from a rough piece in a ball, showing here will be the video, a computer where the computer controlled machine and a big saw blade slowly slicing into the rock with massive tension. video. The jade ball rolled in the wind for 4 months of the exhibition period. We consider the system of the urine compounds would somehow infiltrate into the jade after rubbing against it for a period to signal the invisible phenomena of the whole current. Yeah, so this is the proof from that the urine was detected by the Regional Medical Science Center next to the jadeite report from the Faculty of Geology, Chulalongkorn University, part of the archive in the exhibition. So yeah, that's our
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder for all of you dialing in, please do, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screens. Sorry for any of the sound issues that people might have been experiencing just then. We did our best to craft with existing technologies on the artist ends and the internet issues that we're all facing. So I hope that you're all going to give us some generous vibes for this. Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving on to Lê Giang, who is the artist who is of focus for our Realigning the Cosmos project this year. And Giang has a predominant drawing and sculptural practice, which questions the systematization of human memory and its habit via the study of archive and interdisciplinary collaborative research. She's very compelled by the violence of erasure in the process of categorizing history, and this has a very strong presence in Vietnam. She's particularly interested in its impact on human and non-human worlds, particularly for this project, looking at ideas of the landscape, working across materials such as coal, plaster, and stone, and largely thinking about the symbolic weight of these kinds of materials in revealing hidden colonial narratives or cultural or social superstitions. So her research into precious stone mining in Vietnam attempts to understand the link between feng shui belief and the reality of its physical extraction. And her artistic research, like Jiandyin, relies heavily on the research of others. For Jiandyin, this interdisciplinary research provides statistics that reflect the dangerous social realities of the jade miners, facts that are of little knowledge in the wider community. Giang, her project is unfolding. It's in process right now, and she's been very generous to agree to share some of her research with us today. She's interested in the human habits of belief and the impact that this is taking on the environment. I asked her what particular information is of focus in her research and to share what social or cultural realities are revealed that surprise, alarm, or intrigue her. So she's going to be sharing some of her field research today. Thank you, Giang. We can't see you.
Just a moment. Hello,
Yay.
everyone. I will share my screen now.
Thank you.
So I will talk about my project, which is still in the researching process, and my research is focusing on the feng shui stones, and I'm very interested in why people using and extracting these stones just for to serve a belief. So the feng shui stones people believe that they have energy, and these stones are often divided by the feng shui use of colors, and which is usually 5, according to 5 elements of the universe, which is fire, earth, metal, water, and good. For example, with fire, the color could be like red, orange, or yellow, or purple. And in Vietnam, or many other Asia countries, we believe that each person will have feng shui element that present us. Like I myself is an good element, so my color would be green or black. So in my research, I'm looking at the feng shui stone and the trading of these stones, because these stones are very different from construction stones or material. They are extracting and they are used just for decorating and solely for the feng shui purpose. And in Vietnam, for the last 15 years, the feng shui stones has become very popular. And nowadays, with all the live stream with Facebook, it has been more and more popular and easy to access, which lead to the damage to the environment heavily. So we are looking at a photo of live streaming of a store. In this store, you can see that they are selling many the bowls, the stone bowls, and also what we're looking at here is on the weight is called a natural tree, stone tree. So the feng shui stones can be used like in the bracelets with different colors, or it can be also used as like big sculptures, and usually it would be carved into like powerful animals, images, or objects that relate to our folk stories or beliefs. And the bigger the object, the reason why the stone is like a very popular material for feng shui in Vietnam, because people always believe that stone is the most precious material, because it stands with the time and is very colorful. So I'm very interested in the reason why in the landscape, like all these stones putting together, and I want to understand like why the process of like granting or giving meaning to different stone, is it has anything linked to the stone itself, or is more about the colors and what people want to believe? And on a product that is very popular with the feng shui stone is the paintings. So in these paintings, which is very popular in Vietnam, and in Vietnam, people don't really putting up like oil painting on the wall, but many families, many houses could have like this kind of painting, because people believe that when you have a painting like this, like a painting made of precious stones, it shows that you have money, and it shows that you are like in a high class in the society. So this is a type of paintings that is very popular in many houses. They present, they have a very specific name, which is called a harmonized and peaceful painting, which usually consisted of mountains and water and like a peaceful landscape. And so it shows what interesting about this cave painting to me is that it shows like an utopia, some sort of dreamy nature that we always want to be in. And I began my research by going on field trips to Yên Bái, which is my research site. So going to this Yên Bái is a province in the northern Vietnam, northeast mountainous region in Vietnam, and this is an area that has several different ethnic groups living together. And Yên Bái has been advertised as a province that is striving to develop like a non-smoke industry, which is aimed to boost tourism development. And when I came there several times, I planned in and often got into a trip with the stone traders and the stone miners. And all these are the areas that is famous for the type stones we have thus looked, where they often have the big extraction site. And these sites, they are all illegal. The mining activities here in this region is illegal to the government. But when I came there, because I was in a group of with other miners and other traders, I can access to this deposit. And during this trip, I am there's like an very contrast between the landscape that we often see from the stones, from the feng shui stones, and also from the feng shui stone paintings. When I came there, I can see like a different landscape, and it's like a combination of man-made landscape and nature. And in this area is the area where there are two significant ethnic groups. One is the King people, which is most Vietnamese would be, and the other is the minority ethnic group, the Hmong people. And this the land that we visited that has the deposit, they belong to the Hmong people. So it's very interesting for me to see different group of people with different beliefs looking at this feng shui stone and look at the impact to the nature.
Cầm máy quay thấy có hay phết.
Excuse my sound. So in this, these are the stones that came freshly from the deposit, and they will be putting on the road for usually the King people buyers who would come there and find a stone they want. And it's usually the Hmong people who sells this stone. And when they get the stone from the deposit, they will bring it back to the workshop where they will do all the carving and polishing. So that the process of, so I'm very interested in the process of extracting from the mountain and then carry it back to the workshop and carving it into sculptures. And one of the most favorite sculptures that people usually buy is like the natural rock tree that we have looked at and also the bowls. The bowls is like one of the most popular items that people would like to buy, and because it would be easier to. They said that according to feng shui, they believe that this bowl can be put in anywhere in your house, and with different colors, it will bring different like luck or prosperity or fame or power. And also in one of my field trips, I encountered a cave. This cave is inside a mountain, and in Vietnam there is there often an activity of when people found a cave, they will put like lighting inside and turn it into like a tourism cave. And this cave belonged to a Hmong family. When they found this cave in the land, they put an altar inside, and then they put like green and red lighting inside. For me, it's very interesting, and it struck me like the attitude of people when they with mountain. Like in one hand, people we can extract the stone from the mountain, and we turn it again into the shape of a mountain or a rock, and then in this with this kind of cave, another form of mountain, people turn it into like a sacred space. And also in the belief of like in early history of king people and also the Hmong people, we always have the belief in the sacred spirit of mountain, river, like all the natural element. And the belief has been shifted in like as the king people now, people believing more in feng shui rather than the folk belief. And so I really want to I'm really curious about like to understand why and how a landscape is granted its sacred status, and also like what how science and spirituality behind classification and identification of a landscape, the system of belief that we have in nature. So in this project is really, I think it's really about the landscape we made, the landscape that occur in the wake of the attraction of nature, and also the landscape we create that replicate the nature itself. Okay. So yeah, that's my presentation. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Giang. Well, I know all of these artists' works much better having prepared today's talk, so I do hope that we get some questions from the people listening in. But I I was struck by thinking about extraction in different ways, just as I was listening to you all, in thinking that typically today the discussion in on the art world is that extraction is very much focusing on how the earth is being mined and robbed. But then, you know, to return to ideas of extraction as being something present in our human lives since the dawn of time, when we think about fishermen extracting fish from the sea, but then also how fragile that water source is in the Bantayan Islands, for example. So extraction is also a livelihood. If we think about the trade in what is being removed, extraction is also corruption. It's thinking about how systems are being manipulated in order for personal benefit. Extraction as forms of exploitation, in that labor and landscapes are being violently violated. Extraction as unfair profit, in that we see local people not appropriately benefiting from what is being removed, from what in many instances is their resource that historically belongs to them. And then extraction as a form of government policy, where we can think of the impact of tourism and trade, urban development, where people are being moved to make room for urban infrastructure. And I think that that's something that all of you raise quite, you know, succinctly in your works to varying degrees. And I wondered if I could start with a question for Martha, because we're yet to hear her little voice.
Hi, Zoe.
I was struck by how in your work, Equation of State, which is the mangroves that are moving up and down, and I recall other installation images from that show, where trees are planted and machines look as if they're making them grow. I wondered if you could share a little bit about your relationship between technology and nature, and what role do you see your work playing in that you hold that tension visually in the space quite often?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that, you know, the mechanical is then the human, and I always feel like it's a tug of war a little bit, you know. I mean, you can see that the impact people have and how they claim or extract, and that's why it's such a also a symbolic way of working with, you know, the mangrove plant and the machine that's pulling it violently up and down. But I mean, I was also, I mean, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I mean, people are the reason for the damage or the extraction, but I think we also now have the power to reverse these things, you know. So I'm also now moving into using the technology, let's say, how we could combine it with local knowledge and use it as a more in a positive way, you know. So in the installation, it can look violent, but it could also be I didn't show the whole installation. I had a single mangrove inside in a dark space where it also became very kind of beautiful and poetic in a way, where you were only looking at the shadow play and the water movement. Yeah, so that's how I'm showing it, if that answers the question.
No,
Yeah.
I really appreciate the realization that in as much as we destroy, that there has to be a way that we can change our relationship, that we can reverse. So this idea technology can reverse goes against much thinking of technology, which is to progress forward, right? So I quite like this idea that you spin, which is technology can innovate local forms of community, can innovate local forms of identification to land in a different way.
Yeah. Maybe it also has to do with my background. I'm half Dutch and I'm half Filipina, and so, you know, in Holland the conversation is a lot about Holland has historically been fighting the sea, let's say, and they are now
realizing that this has caused a drastic change in their natural habitat. So now they have freed up rivers, and so it's been interesting for me to see the Dutch tackle these issues, and so it kind of it changed my way of looking at how we have control and how we could reverse things. And so that's something that I try to bring with me here, to also think positively, you know, because we can't really stop these things, but maybe all these things that are coming in, like the internet now and so on, maybe we could turn it around and use it to benefit us. Yeah.
I wondered, have you shown your installations to the local people that helped produce the work? Do you ever get to stage it?
In parts, yeah. I mean, the like Gilobong, that was completely made here and shown here. It was only that friends of mine in the city and in the island next to us really wanted us to share it, and we were very hesitant. And it actually ended up being good to share it outside of the island. But for the installation, it's quite difficult. I've shown it in parts, but as a whole, I have to say, working as a whole installation was such a challenge for myself, because I only put it together really when it arrived in Manila, and it, you know, and all the everything was in place. But that was actually one of that we were working on at the moment, to really, how do you say, I just finished my studio here, so I could use my studio as let's say a space to share. But with the pandemic, we've been a bit careful in gathering everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next for you out there, because I feel that the nexus between your art making and your community work is at this interesting point where your sense of agency is really in both worlds. And I'm curious to see how your community start to understand that their awareness is being raised through thinking with an artist. That for me is actually really interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
So just thinking about how Jiandyin, you know, we've gone from thinking about Martha's work, which is really very much looking at how people interact, how people have a relationship to water, mineral, material, land, and then your own work, which I'm quite compelled by, this moving marble ball. And the liquid surrounding the moving is entirely human urine that has been measured for the quantity of drug, meth, that this took for this entire heaven, earth rock to form. You know, this idea that human labor has been exploiting for the point of saying this is a rock from heaven. In the same way that Lê Giang's practice is talking about how beautiful idyllic paintings are completely in contrast with the waste that is laid after these rocks are removed. Like, there's quite an irony. But I'm conscious in the work of yours in Jiandyin, you do not put any people in them. So the material, the objects, there's no actual human in there. There's an idea of them there, but they're not present. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your decisions there, because you've collected so much information on so many different humans. And I know in previous projects you've showed portraits, but I notice in the last few iterations of Magic Mountain that you've really just kept to the statistic. So I'm wondering if you can share any reflections on that. And just if you can speak as close as you can to the mic so we can hear you.
Very sorry about the microphone. Is it working better now?
Yeah, it's okay. Just really need to speak as close as you can to the computer.
Yeah, So yeah, I think for the Jiandyin, we're quite concerned about the personal property issue also. Yeah. So that is partly the main point also, that they don't they should not and or appear, yeah.
And also because the way that we thought urine is not really cannot open to the public. Yeah, it's kind of like we work with the officials under table.
Ah.
And we pay them. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a really important fact to recall for many out there who might not understand that collecting data in many parts of the world is involving favors that you don't want to reveal.
So actually we try to find out the hole in the system, and we got to know that the officer, they didn't know that they could not do this. It's kind of the in the role. Right.
Okay.
And we support them to get the urine from the drug user. Actually, because most of Thai people we have stopped by the police on the highway, and even me, I was stopped by the police, and they can check, they can test my urine, they can ask me to pee, and without any paper, without any information, they can do that illegally. So, and then I find out that okay, they used to do that. Maybe we can do the way in the route that how they collect urine from the people.
Wow.
In our case, yeah, we pay under table.
Yeah, for those of you out there who may have had difficulty hearing, Jiandyin actually had to employ the use of, I think, 2 official scientific bodies to ensure the measurement of the meth that they were working with was the correct real jadeite, not the jade that you can find in multiple other areas, not just in our Hippocamp mine. So the amount of scientific detail that goes into their data collection is actually really quite precise. And when I look at their broader practice, it's quite incredible, the archive that sits behind the visual. And I'm quite aware that for all of you, actually, you have a lot of understanding of community processes, institutional processes, political processes that at times don't appear in the work. And so as a curator who has a passion for working with artists in contexts that are dealing with these difficult circumstances, I'm very intrigued by what happens to all of this material that you collect, because it is often incredibly rare, not present in the dominant libraries or systems or public awareness. So that's why I'm really interested in how artists make the choice of what visual or what not to make visual when there's such an immense amount of information behind you, you know? So Giang, I was great to hear you talk about the process. I'm really looking forward to the show. It'll be at the factory likely early July. I'm quite sort of really excited to see what happens with this idea of landscape and the utopic, and then the combination in what that actually spells out realistically, and also how you might, I know you and I have talked about how the categorizations of color equaling good luck, longevity, faith, and how that is being exploited for other means. I mean, we all know that certain luxury brands they put precious stones on their material, and then that is purchased in also. So this question of where luxury enters, I'm also curious to see what happens. But I wanted to throw a kind of final question out there to all three of you to see where replies might come back. Do you believe that it's possible that human behavior, our beliefs, our assumptions, and our frameworks of survival, do you believe that we can curb, we can change how destructive our desire is? Do you think that this is possible? And do you actively think about your role in pushing this conversation to your audiences? Do you think about how you play a role in making somebody think about their own consumption?
The role.
Does anyone want to go?
Our role here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you share the question again? Perhaps
it's for anyone. It's for Martha, Zhang, or Jiandyin. Anyone can answer. It's basically what I'm interested in is, as artists, do you think about how much agency, how much power you have, how much space you have to be able to talk about issues about desire and consumption, and that you have the chance to raise the issues? Does that become an element in your work that is important to promote? Or do you find yourself just processing this just for yourselves? It's a question about your relationship to your audiences, to what extent you feel that as an artist, particularly if we think about a COVID-19 moment, our museums, our galleries are mostly shut around the world. And I'm struck by the fact that all of you are working in communities outside of the art scene. So to what extent are you really conscious of this in your practice? Do you think about taking the art completely not inside the gallery system? Or Martha, do you want
to take it back, because it's a lot that you, but you were mentioning to curb things, how if we could change things, you know, if we have hope in this. I think, you know, there's sometimes the more research, at least for me personally, the more research I do, the more I realize that this is part of a really big system that we have in place already, you know, when we talk about the extraction, mining. And so that's why I felt that, you know, I've been working with community for a while, but I've also now felt the need to be part of the bigger conversations, to really talk to leaders, or to really look at policy making, you know, because maybe after so long of doing it, sometimes you feel a bit desperate because, you know, like an example was, I think I talked about this with you, Zoe, that in 2017, we won this big international prize. And then you come back home and you think, it's only gotten worse, you know? So you start thinking, what was the point? And that the pandemic really gave me time to rethink all of that and really think about how could it be more useful, or how could it be, you know, how could we, I mean, sometimes it feels a bit hopeless because it really is a part of a bigger system, you know, when you, anyways, that's another conversation maybe. But yeah, so sometimes I think small and I say, okay, just by me sharing this with my community on this island and then moving outside of my direct space and moving, let's say, into gallery spaces or anything else, it will have it, at least we're having this conversation today, and at least there's people listening, and and that slowly will change things. But sometimes you also get a little bit more radical and impatient in thinking, what's the so yeah, I think for me personally, I'm trying to find ways to balance that now, to be maybe we look at the bigger system and understand how this works and how things could change there, and how you could still keep it very informal and saying, I need to have these conversations with anyone I meet, with anyone I work with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martha.
I really think it's really about the balance, because I think the target group audience I want to target is like the buyers, because I feel like the whole industry of feng shui stones it relies on the desire from the buyers. But also, when I came there to the site, and I feel like, and I can see like the life of people who owns the land, the Hmong people families who owns the land that has these kind of stones. Actually, their life got better. They have better condition, living condition, because before that, all they can do is agriculture, like, and because it's all very rocky, mountainous, so the income is like usually is only enough for them for like every day, but with this whole new industry, actually their family get rich, and it really changed their lives. So I feel like this conversation need to be said for the people in the cities to understand like where their stones coming from, and what it does to the nature, but also finding the balance of what is really good for the people in that research area is it's like it belongs to it depends on the bigger system, like Martha said.
Yeah. Thank you, Giang. Do you have anything to say, Jiandyin?
Yeah, I think it's for as a role of artists and also work in art. I think there's an area that is interesting when you go out there, especially when you are work on the artistic research work. You go to the field and you meet the people. Your role is quite different. You're not being as a journalist, but you can also carry a position as a investigator, and also at the same time you are part of the local um, uh, residents, local area there, and as a civilian, someone who can
An active citizen.
active, yeah, like an active citizen who speaks to them naturally as a human being also. So this is an area that artists
Different
has a different role than other yeah.
Wonderful. You're all masterminds, and I have deep respect, really. I am very much in awe of all of your work, and I really hold a special space in my heart for artists that go this far in collecting material and working with communities and putting their own lives at risk quite often. And so thank you for sharing, and to all of you who are still there, thank you for being a part of our little session this morning. Oh, hang on, I can see that there might be some questions. Sorry, I didn't see them before. Thank you, Bill. Okay, so a question from Bill. In all of the artist projects, we see both nature and people being extracted, tamed, and domesticated for the sake of human production and consumption. In Jiandyin's project, laborers are fed drugs to improve their performance. In Martha's later project, the artist attempts to save and regrow mangroves. In both of these instances, what's considered natural in both human and their surrounding becomes tamed, domesticated, controlled, improved for better or worse. What role do you think arts and the process of art making play in this process? Because doesn't the process of art making also involve extracting data, whether scientific or from real life, and then reconstructing, taming, domesticating this data so that they fit in with the vision of the artist and the materialization of the artwork? So the question really is, are you conscious that you are yourselves extracting data and then turning it into another form? And I guess Jiandyin did respond to that in that they felt sensitive to the sharing of the materials that you place inside the work. Do any of you have any response to that? I mean, it is an interesting twist to realize that artists themselves are extractors.
Yeah, the discussion of data is interesting. I had some students coming here and gathering data or more on illegal fishing and such. And I remember having always, I had this period kind of desperate saying, we can collect data for you. What do you want us to collect? And everyone always sitting, we were an artist, stop worrying about this now, you know. But yeah, back to the question. True. I'm still looking at what this collecting, how it could be used historically or in the future, and yeah, I'm not sure how to answer on that right now. Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting one for artists to think of and be conscious of. I think there are many artists out there who are aware of how they become data extractors and then they, to their own ends, reimagine again. So that for me, if I was to try and answer that, it's about the levels of collaboration with the people involved and how you make that visible, how you give authorship. I mean, questions of authorship come into light, I think.
Yeah.
The Giang.
Yeah, so the second question is what I have been thinking about when finalizing my ideas to do the production. Because I've been thinking my project is very much focused on the stone as the material, but in the process of thinking what materials I should use for the show, I think that definitely I cannot use stone itself, because if then I will follow the trace of the footstep of all those stores that have been using stones to carve into sculptures, from trade sculpture. And because the project is very much about environment and interaction, so I'm very careful about what materials I would use, and so I also and also like using the waste from the production of the stone is have been considered. But yeah, I definitely think that materials are what we are very conscious about when working in like this.
Yeah, that's an interesting one also. It's something that they always have to deal with. For me, with video and video installation, you know, the flat screens, the projectors, even the cost of it, you know, the producing of it, you think, okay, I'm good. But then when you share it somewhere, you know, you come on LED screens, you know. Yeah, that's a difficult one, definitely.
But I also think, you know, why we are very conscious about the material we use. But being an artist, if obviously I think if we want to save environment, we shouldn't produce anything. You know, there is a contradiction in the thoughts. But like we have to be very careful, but also I don't think that we should let it stop us when to produce what we really want. But just be more responsible, you know. Anything that apply to designers, artists, and yeah, with anyone in creative industry, as long as works are not like videos or images that is projecting. Yeah.
Jiandyin, do you have anything to add to that? It's okay if you don't.
In the circle of the industry and drug industry, they are like a circle of the endless circle that they extract
from layer to layer.
Yeah, it's kind of
never-ending circle. Yeah.
Even at the end of the exhibition, we found out that we already extract a half-life of amphetamine from urine to jade ball already. And now we have jade ball contain a half-life of in a different form.
So yeah, it's about time, and we still learn about that. It's a long-term process for us to understand what is happening and what will happen. And that's why sometimes we leave it to audience also, that it can be an open end, and everyone can react differently. Yeah.
Yes, so I can understand that your research is still very much ongoing. I've got one last question, which comes from Bridie. Do you feel that your works do or will act as a historical archive, capturing people and crafts of extraction today? Do you think this will be important for your community collaborators in order to understand your work?
Yes, I think so. Maybe even not just to understand the work, but maybe to understand this, for them to understand the situation, or to their own situation. Yeah.
I think for like Martha project is quite like art as a tree that takes time for people to understand. When you're growing tree, and you take time and look at the tree growing up, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not quite able to hear you, but I think you're saying that it's important to keep the material, and that all of the data is something that would be, are you saying it would be used for purposes later?
Well,
Well, yeah, he was saying that the work with the community is like growing tree, that the community also grow together with the work to understand something, and will learn about the message.
Okay.
Yeah.
Giang, did you have anything else to share just then? No? It's okay.
I have been looking at a new question, but yeah, I definitely think that is an archive in its own self. The materials we have been collecting from the research.
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it, actually, the artwork as an archive in itself. And then again, it comes back to how much information you provide within the artwork, so the context is given. But anyway, one more question. If we are to curtail these various extractions, are we not diminishing the livelihood of workers? And how do you justify your conclusions? I'm not sure that I understand that question, but I think he's asking a question about, sure, we're talking about the need for change, but perhaps he's not hearing how you see a solution to the problem. I mean, I think I can see solutions in Martha's work. I feel like you're trying to say that communities can get together in differing ways and create differing usages for plastics, so that these plastics can be built for substitutions of metal or other industrial waste. Like, I feel like you are very much trying to suggest different forms of livelihood can be created.
Yeah, livelihood is really, I mean, of course, the first thing that people need, that's why all of this is happening, is they need to eat, they need to survive. So if we talk about alternatives or solutions, that is the first thing that we need to think about, of alternative livelihood, like like the extraction of jade and the other stones. People are not doing that for fun, they need to eat. So, and it's the same with the fishermen. They're destroying their own sea because they're desperate. They're risking their life because they need to feed their children. And if we could somehow, if you've analyzed this problem and collected all this data, the clear conclusion is that there needs to be an alternative. There needs to be somewhere else for these people to go if they have to stop doing this kind of work. And that then becomes, like a whole different challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and finding plastic products, of course, will not bring a solution to everyone, but maybe bringing attention to leaders to really analyze the problem and not say, okay, tourism, that's going to be the solution. We ahead of time need to use other islands as examples where tourism has been the main livelihood, and it hasn't worked for the locals because they will input people. The locals will be replaced by people coming from other places to work in the resorts. It won't be a solution. That's what I'm, trying to already start talking to people about. It's predictable. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways.
Does Giang or Jiandyin have any comments on that last question?
I think maybe it's not only, it might not doesn't have to be like a totally different livelihood, but rather like if the mining, for example, can have a more proper system, or it becomes legally and there is a protective system to the nature and also the workers. Maybe that also helps. Yeah, I don't know.
Jiandyin, do you have anything to say? No?
Complicated.
No, not sure which projection we should involve. Yeah.
I think the question since the dawn of time has been, is the role of art to observe and reflect, or is it a medium through which change can occur? And it's the age-old debate about the power of art. And I have had many conversations with so many artists that say, you are an idealist if you think that anything I create can have any change. And it's as a curator who often works with issues of great contention, I think that it's a incredibly difficult tightrope to walk, because on the one hand, culture and artists have referred as spaces of reflection and renewal, but at the same time, we're entering an era where culture is incredibly threatened with space. Indeed, the very means by which we can claim an identity is being reduced. So I do ask myself a lot more in the last few years, are we facing a moment where as cultural producers, we need to take more responsibility for what we can say? It's a question I ask myself because there are so many issues out there needing more visibility. But I struggle with thinking that it is our role to fall into providing solutions. I think that on the one hand, prompting the need to work collaboratively with community in solving, like Martha, that's one reason why I'm quite in awe of what you're doing, because you're working with different communities and saying, hey, what about this and what about that? Your art alone is not expected to form the solution, but you are a little trigger in there that says,
it's more like a dream, though. I have to say, I'm not successful. Maybe it's just that you may. For me, I feel as an artist, you can kind of dream it. You have the luxury of imagining the different people together and what we could achieve. You can envision something, and then you believe in it, so you try to share that. And for me, I need to try to share those thoughts I have, because then that's my way of at least trying to have an input, is to kind of dream of how we could, do it, maybe. Yeah. So, but I don't know if this will, I'm not saying I'm successful at all. I wish, but at least trying to, the idea of, I'm just thinking, if we could just have different people with different specializations, if we could just come together, it's that simple sometimes, and I think we have that excuse that we could somehow get them together, even if we could just do that, I feel very hopeful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not an artist, I'm a curator, but I feel similar energy towards education. I feel a giant, urgent need to be participating as an educator for the next generations, because our histories are incredibly corrupted in terms of what's accessible, what's told, what's remembered, what's given value. And I think that culture is a space to which we should be able to really problematize those hierarchies and access points. Yeah. Well, listen, guys, we've gone like nearly 2 hours. It's been some incredible debate and sharing, and it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for enduring all of the varying technological conversations we had prior and during to make all of this wrap and work. Massive thank you also to Bridie for hosting, to Campbelltown for assisting with the promotion, and especially also to the Australia Council for the Arts and the Curatorial Associates Program, to which this is a 4-part series of talks, and the next one will be with on the 10th of April, if I'm not mistaken, with Adam Porter from Campbelltown Art Centre. If any of you have the future chance to get to Vietnam post-COVID, whenever that will be, you're all welcome to please visit us at the factory. And I do wish all of you artists good luck and continue the marvelous work. I wish we could all now go to lunch or a drink.
I wish.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. See you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.